Hello everybody, it's CALC here. Hope you're doing well on this fine evening. Welcome to another Novation live stream, and this one is going to be quite an interesting one, I think. This time round we're going to look at how we can use sequencers and controllers, but rather than actually sequencing synthesizers and recording notes and that sort of thing, we're going to take a look at actually using these kind of devices, but specifically with effects processors this evening. So so I just was having a little jam before we started up there, again using the SL MkIII here. And one of the things that I was doing throughout that was really just kind of had a couple of sequences running, and then I've been kind of using the control surface here to kind of really play around with the effects that some of the instruments are running through. So, as always, with these live stream sessions, if you've got any questions, I'm keeping an eye as much as I can on the chat room there. So if there's anything specifically you want to ask me about kind of what we're doing here, please feel free. That's one of the reasons why we're actually, sort of holding these live streams, to give you guys an opportunity to connect, to ask any questions you might have about the things that we're doing here as well. So, I'm just going to quickly change the camera. So here we are. This is the shot that we'll have throughout most of the video, and just want to kind of have a quick rundown of the way things are set up to start with. Now, at the moment, I've got the SL MkIII connected to all of the kind of effects that we've got over here. So over on this side here, I have a Meris Autobit Junior, an Auto Boom, which is a fantastic compressor and distortion. They call it a warming unit, and I would say it definitely does that sort of thing. The Auto Bam is next to it. Obviously, that looks very similar. That's a wonderful sounding reverb effects processor. There's a Strymon Deco over there. We're not actually going to do much with that, simply because that isn't a MIDI'd effect. The things that we're going to look at are really sort of controlling these these effects processors, but through MIDI control. Anyway, below these three devices, I've also brought out the Big Sky here. This is a Strymon reverb pedal, a stunning thing, really nice sounding, and so much it can do. I mean, it's got so many different reverb algorithms in there. There's a lot of scope for it. So over on the corner there is also a new, possibly favourite of mine, I think, looper, and that's actually a looper pedal. So that in itself is a very interesting thing to pair with a MIDI controller, and I'm going to sort of go through how that's all kind of working, because there's some very interesting things that you can do using the looper specifically with MIDI. The other devices that are connected, excuse me, are the kind of some of the usual suspects that I have in the studio here. You can see here I've got an Electron Octatrack Mark II as well. That was providing sort of the drum loops and drum break stuff before. Now underneath where my face is, in the screen up at the top, I have a Beat Squeezer and a Yamaha Reface CP as well. And both of those were actually playing in that jam right at the beginning too. Now, of course, those devices are using, MIDI clock to keep in sync. So specifically, the Octatrack is very much doing that. And of course, the Beat Squeezer and the Reface CP are being sent MIDI notes, note data, to actually play the sounds, I guess, is for want of a better way of describing it. Of course, each of these devices also has parameters. They have ways to control and manipulate and shape the sound. Much in the same way as any kind of instrument, based around MIDI is going to have that, things like the Summit, the synthesizer here, basically most modern synthesizers today speak to each other via MIDI, but specifically for being able to control and manipulate the parameters of those instruments, they use things called CC numbers, controller change numbers. Now, controller change numbers are basically a way of me saying, okay, let me take hold of this parameter on this device, but actually control it on this device over here. So it's a really neat way of being able to get everything to communicate well together. So, when you're thinking about MIDI information, of course, you've got MIDI notes, you've got velocity, how hard you strike a key, you've got all that kind of usual sort of stuff, aftertouch and all of those sorts of things, but also controller change is a really, I would say, quite an important part of the world of MIDI. And really that's where the controllers from Novation come in, I think. Very much so with the SL MkIII. I mean, you can see on the top panel here, we've got a lot of configuration. We've got 8 pots here, and then if I press down here, I have another bank of 8 pots here. So 16 of these encoders up at the top here. I've got 8 faders here as well. These buttons to the side also allow me to send MIDI data. And when it's set on this page, when we've got a yellow line at the top and a blue line at the bottom, these are actually controls for the internal sequencer. So a set of mute switches. The bottom row here is a set of solo switches, so I can isolate a particular track. But if I use the arrow going down here, now I enter into a bank of 16 buttons that are again available for me to create my own mappings or use some of the included mappings inside the SL MkIII to control other devices. So that's a whole lot of control here, but one of the really key things about something like this is that's totally configurable as well, and that means I can go inside the hardware, if you like, and create my own mappings. So I can decide where I want the controls to be positioned on the SL MkIII. Now, also, I should give special mention to this little fellow over here as well, the Launchpad Pro Mark III. This is also an incredibly powerful control surface, as well as being a very powerful sequencer. We've got a full-blown sequencer inside here. We've got a note entry system. We've got a lot of things inside the Launchpad Pro Mark III. And of course, it's fantastic in the Ableton world as well. It is also a really very powerful Ableton Live controller too. For me personally, when I'm making music myself, I stay pretty much in the hardware world here. So, I'm using things like the SL MkIII pretty much exclusively at the moment, I have to say, to control all of these various devices. And they're all connected via a straightforward type of connection, a MIDI connection. Now, if I just pull this out of the back of the SL, you can hopefully see if I can just bring that in front of the camera a little bit. This is, well, it's not a particularly great shot of it, but this is a 5-pin DIN MIDI plug. Now, MIDI can be transferred in a number of ways, and on the SL MkIII, we've got a 5-pin DIN MIDI connection. That's a standard type of connection. And sent out of devices using a little mini jack as well, and we can explore a little bit about how that works as well as we go into some of the devices that we're going to control here. You can be a mini jack, or it can actually be a full-size jack as well, and it's quite interesting sort of working in that world. It does mean that you don't have to take up a huge amount of space on the back of a device with a great big 5-pin connection, and in actual fact the MIDI connection itself, there's enough pins on a TRS tip, ring and sleeve mini jack able to send all that MIDI data down there. The other way that you can connect, of course, with MIDI is USB, and that's primarily, obviously, how you would connect a lot of computer-based kind of instruments together as well. So, there are kind of different ways that you can connect these sorts of things. In this particular setup, I'm using a MIDI output here. So this is using the 5-pin DIN MIDI out. Now on the SL MkIII, I actually have 2 MIDI outputs on here. So that's really, really useful because basically I can have, well, MIDI works over 16 channels, and by virtue of the fact that I have 2 outputs here, that actually gives me 2 independent sets of 16 MIDI channels. Therefore, I have 32 MIDI channels. Now, I don't have 32 MIDI instruments in this room, but if I did, I could address each of those instruments separately, and that's a really nice thing to be able to do. And that's very easily set up here on the SL. If you go to the global menu, you can, on the first page here, the MIDI page, we've got a little option here for MIDI out, and you can set that to be MIDI out, or you can set it to be MIDI through. I should give a quick mention to MIDI through as well, because MIDI through essentially is a way to pass a MIDI signal through a device, as its name suggests. Essentially, it's repeating the signal that comes in on the MIDI input, and it's actually just linking that to another output. So that allows you to chain lots of devices together. And in actual fact, in this kind of setup, I'm using MIDI throughs around. So for example, my MIDI out one here is going into the Octatrack here, and then the MIDI through is then sending that out to another device. In actual fact, that's sending it out to a MIDI splitter, because I have a number of different devices here. For example, these auto effects processors here, the auto bit as well, and indeed the blooper. They only really give you the opportunity, well, in this particular setup at least, to have a MIDI input. So I need to take a MIDI signal and then split that into several different MIDI outputs there, so I can then connect to the MIDI inputs of these effects processors. So that's kind of a quick rundown of how it's working. Oh, yeah, I mentioned, I've got MIDI 1 here going out to the Octatrack. MIDI 2 is actually going out over to this side of the room, and I've got another MIDI splitter there, which is kind of sending that MIDI data out to various different other devices in the room as well. So that's kind of a quick way of how it's connected. Now, in some effects processors, if you kind of think about sort of studio-based effects processors, they will have a 5-pin DIN MIDI connection on them. For example, these Auto devices here have got the full-size 5-pin DIN connection. The Big Sky has also got a MIDI in and a MIDI out. And again, that's really useful. So that allows me to use that standard 5-pin connection. But there are some very, very interesting, I would say probably guitar-based effects pedals that are being produced at the moment. I mean, the world of boutique effects at the minute is really very strong, and some very, very strong pedals and effects are coming through. And often they are released with a MIDI input in as well. However, they're not always going to be a 5-pin DIN connection. So how do we get MIDI into those devices as well? Now, this is where it gets kind of a little bit confusing in terms of different manufacturers have different standards, different ways that they want you to be able to access the MIDI part of their effects processors. So for example, here the blooper has a jack input. Now this is a full-size 1/4-inch jack input. And actually you can just see the black kind of right-angled connection there is actually where the MIDI goes in. This particular setup is slightly strange because I've got MIDI and I've also got a foot switch, which you might be able to just see on the floor down here. I've also got a foot switch going in at the same time. Now, the blooper itself is using a type of connection called a... Now, if I hold this up to the camera, I don't know if you can see that. This is a little jack connection that has 2 black bands on it. So that means it's got a tip, then it's got a second connection, a ring, and then the final connection, the third connection there is the sleeve. So in this instance, I've taken, well, basically this is a circuit MIDI dongle. Normally you would find a little mini jack on here. And it gives you a 5-pin DIN socket on there. And what I've done is I've soldered it up so that the correct pins are going to the right place on this jack cable here. Now, specifically for the blooper, the MIDI input goes in on the ring. So I find the right pin on the MIDI connection here, and make sure that's connected via, by soldering to the ring connection here. And that then means I can plug a MIDI cable into this, and then I'll be able to control that blooper pedal with MIDI. The same for the Autobit Junior there as well. However, that particular unit doesn't use TRS. This is using a standard tip and sleeve. So this is just a standard jack cable here with a sleeve, which is the big long part here, and then of course the tip there. And the MIDI goes into the Autobit Junior via the tip end here. So I took the same kind of cable here and wired that up, but wired it up slightly differently because this time the MIDI signal, the connector where most of the MIDI data is coming out of, is going directly to the tip. That's going into the Autobit Meris, and once again I can then start to control it with MIDI. Now, just as a slight sideline here, I just want to mention with the blooper there, as I say, I have this foot switch here. Now, I mentioned earlier that the blooper receives its MIDI on the ring end here. And that means that the tip here is actually for a foot switch to connect. And that gives me a really nice system because that allows me to use the foot switch down here to switch it into loop mode, switch it out of loop mode, switch it into overdub, you know, all of those sorts of things. So that frees up my hands here to be able to still use that looper and record directly in. But of course, because the MIDI is connected to the ring side of that connection, I've still got full MIDI control over there as well. So for me personally, that's a really neat solution. And you might be able to see there's like a sort of a red socket connection up just underneath the Otto BAM there. I'm using an insert cable. This is a cable, like a Y cable, that is connecting to a stereo or TRS tip ring sleeve connection. And that allows me to plug in the foot switch down here, also the MIDI connection as well, join those two together, and they both go to the right place in the blooper. So it's a really quite a nice nice way for me personally, at least anyway, to be able to use that that looper pedal in its own way. Okay, so I mean that's kind of a way of how to connect all of these devices together. So how do we actually control them as well? Well, I think what we can do now is well, let's just take a look. I mean, I've got this particular kind of setup here, and I'll just kind of go through how it is on the SL at the moment. So here I've got the beat squeezer. Again, you can't see it just at the moment. It's under that shot of the room, but I've just got a nice piano sound running here. Now, if I'm remotely, yeah, okay, so I've got the beat squeezer running here. Now I'm just going to quickly turn on the zones mode, and that allows me to keep the key bed connected to the beat squeezer so I can play. Now if I go over here to my big sky, go up to this page, I can now start to play around with some of the parameters that we've got loaded in here. Just bring the mix up. And now you can hear I control the settings on the big sky as well. So what does that mean? In real terms, it means that I'm able to basically keep focused on the instrument at hand here, and then actually still take control of these effects and start to play around with the sounds. It's a really neat solution for me. And again, I can do all sorts of things in here. So for example, here, I mean, I've just got it set to this particular preset, but I can also go in and actually change the presets. Now, if you see, as I'm pressing this particular button here, hopefully you can see on the screen here on the not on the beat squeezer, on the big sky, that's actually changing the preset. So I can use this central point here to actually send what we call program change. This is another type of connection or MIDI kind of data that I can use to actually send in here to say, okay, change the preset. And again, that's a really nice thing to be able to do. And actually, because of the SL MkIII here, I'm actually able to sequence those data changes. And that's really, really quite a neat trick. In fact, let me just kind of quickly try and show you that on the sequencer side. So I've just quickly tapped the record button here. Now, if I press and hold this pad, it'll go red. Now, normally that's expecting perhaps, you know, a note for me to play a note in. Oh, I've got zones on, so I'm playing a note on a different track, so it wouldn't make any difference there. But if I press this and press that now when I press this step, you see the light has come up here to say that note is on that step. Well, the SL MkIII is able to actually also record additional data. You can have up to 8 lanes of automation, we call it, and that's essentially being able to record in movements that I use the knobs for, or even with the buttons here as well. So let me just press the clear button. Yeah, we've got something cleared on there. Let's go to this step, and if I say okay, let's add an increase there, and that's going to increase the preset for the big sky. So maybe I'll go to this step. Okay, let's add another increase. Here we'll go back one, here we'll go back again, and now we'll just quickly just change a few more as well. So I've created this effect, but the automation isn't just a knob movement here. The automation is actually selecting the preset in the device. So let me just double check if we've got anything muted here. We want to make sure Big Sky is not muted. It's not muted at the moment. If it's muted, it won't send that data. It's muting that data away. But if I keep it unmuted and hit play. Now if you look over at the big sky, now the big sky is actually changing its preset because, if I go back to this page here, this data is being sent on the various different steps there. So that's a really neat thing to be able to do with your effects. You're not just locked into just staying with one particular effect as it's running. You can actually go in a bit deeper and say, actually, okay, let's start to play around with how those effects are actually working, and essentially start to program in sequences effectively of your effects processes. Effectively, lots of effectivelys there, but basically, it's a really nice thing to be able to do. Now, so this is program change, as I say. Also, it's just really nice to be able to just say, okay, actually I want this preset for what I'm playing right now, and I don't have to go over there. Normally for me, the big sky is sitting up on a shelf here, and it's kind of out of the way. But for me, it doesn't particularly matter because everything that I need to be able to control it is directly here in front of me as well. Okay, so that's kind of a quick look at kind of program change stuff that we have here. Let's have a bit of a play now. I think it's just let's just have a bit of a jam, I guess. So I'm going to go to the clear session here. Let's go to the reface. I do like jamming quite a bit on the reface. I must say it's got it's just got a very, very nice feel to it. And now, instead of recording into the sequencer here, I'm going to have a bit of a play around on the blooper over there because, as I say, it's a really nice thing that we've got going. Now, for me, again, I've been really searching for a looping device that is able to take MIDI clock. Now, what does MIDI clock mean? Well, when the SL, because it's a sequencer, it has to run in time. It runs in tempo. In fact, we have a tempo button here as well. Actually, I'm glad I pressed that. I've just noticed it's a bit slow, so I'm just going to increase that up a bit. So I have a tempo control here. So this is actually sending out tempo data. Now, a looper, of course, is working with time. But often with a looper, you've got to kind of hit start, record your loop, and stop it just at exactly the right time, which can be very difficult to do. I mean, you could be, one of the most dexterous people around and actually still getting the loop to just be a perfect kind of measure, or bar if you like, is really not an easy thing to be able to do. So a MIDI, a looper that receives and is synchronized to MIDI clock is a really nice thing, and they're kind of few and far between. There's a few out there, but that's really why the blooper caught my eye, because it's something that I can actually send clock from my sequencer, from my SL MkIII, over to the looper pedal there, and then I can actually keep everything nicely in time with the blooper. So let's just have a quick look at that now. I'm going to quickly, again, just turn on zones. I need to just go and turn my zone on to part 2, which is the reface. Now, the reason I've done that is, and this again is a nice little sort of tip on the SL here, with zones you can set the keyboard to control one of the 8 tracks. There are 8 individual tracks here on the SL MkIII, and you can set it to control, well, either 1 or 8 of them. You can decide how you want the keyboard to be split up to control their things. Now, I've set this zone up to control the whole keybed for the reface. So, bottom note, top note is going to be controlling the reface on the keyboard. But what it does allow me to do is move through all these various different instruments as well here, or effects, depending on how you've got your SL MkIII set up. So I can go to the blooper page here, have access to the blooper controls, but still use the keyboard to play a different instrument. So that's a really nice thing to be able to do as well. Now, first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to just turn on the clock sort of value here. So what that means is it's going to say, when is this going to synchronize? And I'm going to clear it out. Now, if I press this button here, you should hopefully see we get 3 red buttons there. I've now erased what was in there previously. It was nice knowing it, but now that's gone. It's not a big problem for me. Now, I'm going to go to my Octatrack here, and I'm just going to bring in a beat just so I've got something to play around with. And we'll just go for this one here, I think. Yeah, nice little beat there. Now go back to the blooper. I've got to get my feet ready for this, so forgive me a second. Over on the floor here, I have a foot switch. That, as I mentioned, is going in directly here. But as I press it, if I press it just a little bit before the beat, it's going to still go into looping at the beat. So that's a really nice thing for me. I think it takes a little bit of pressure off me getting everything just synchronized. So if I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, and of course, I just need to make, now, that's a very good point. Okay, so I wasn't actually sending any audio into the blooper at all there. Actually, it's a good point that that happened, because it's worth mentioning about how all the audio is being routed as well. Now, over in the corner here, you can just see the corner of it up here. I have I've got quite a big mixing desk here, which has things called auxiliaries on them. Now, I use a lot of auxiliaries. An auxiliary is basically, you know, your channel strip starts at the top, comes all the way down to the bottom where the fader is, so you can adjust the volume. But an auxiliary is like a little branch that comes off and can be sent elsewhere. So on here, I've got an auxiliary connected directly to the blooper's input. My reface is not being sent there at the moment, so I'm just going to very quickly go and turn that up. So that then I know that the reface is going to be sending to the blooper, and of course is going to record that for the loop. So just give me a second. Okay, now once again, I'm just going to erase that loop that we had before. So I'm just going to hit erase there, and hopefully that's, we've got the 3 red buttons there, 3 red LEDs. So once again, I'm going to hit play. So I've got my little measure, 1, 2, 3. So there we go, we recorded that in to the blooper now. And now I can start to use the controls that I've mapped here to play around with that sound. So here's the stability, we can mess around with the kind of the sound of it. Actually, I've just got a bit of autobam there, I think. Yeah, let's get it a bit more dry. So now I can also bring in some of the effects that are in the blooper. So let's go for this one. We'll turn on mod B. And now I can use this to kind of play around with the sound. So here it is in normal, but if I then start to automate or record this, bit random, but never mind. So what's going on there is, the blooper is sitting over here, the SL MkIII is sending controller change message over to the blooper, and that's actually controlling, well, in actual fact, that particular knob on the blooper. So you can get some really quite nice things going on with that as well. Well, let's see what... So, there are 6 different effects in the blooper that you can play, and I've got them all set up onto these switches here. So let's go for the smooth speed control here, which is on mod A, the first effects processor. So I'm going to put that switch that on now. So we can get even more crazy with it. Anyway. Well, I'm not sure quite where I'm going with this particular track. Well, in fact, let's just take these things off so we can just go back to the... So, I don't know if you can see here on the SL MkIII, that automation is still running, but of course I've turned off the effect here, and therefore it's not having an effect on the looper. But if I want to, I can just bring it back in. So not only are we able to record notes into the sequencer here, but using automation, we can also record controls for the effects processors as well. And that, I think, is a really very strong thing to be able to do, and gives you a lot of scope for being able to play around with your sound. You don't necessarily just have to set and forget an effect now. You can use this sort of stuff to really take hold of your effects processors and start to have a nice play around with, you know, with all of that sort of stuff. So, right, I'm going to just pop into the chat there and just see if we've got any if we've got any questions that I can answer. So well, there's quite a few people there now. So let's see. Curious if there's ever going to be a way to share custom layouts within the component site. That's from Drew Bragle. Well, that's a good question. I mean, in terms of ourselves kind of looking to do that, there's nothing really I can say at this stage about anything like that. However, using components, which is what we're actually going to get into in the next section here, there are ways to be able to share and download and use your templates, and send them around to other people. So I mean, it is possible to do that already. But I think Drew's question is: it going to be possible to do it specifically within the components website or standalone app? Well, as I say, there's nothing really I can kind of say or divulge in a session like this about that, but, there are certainly ways around being able to do that. So let's see. Please make a Launchpad X video to control the new Logic Live loops. Well, that's a great request, I think. Yes, of course, Logic has had quite a large update, I think, of days. And of course, the Launchpad is now a device that will work with the new Logic update as well. So that's a really good shout. That's Chris C. I think, that's probably something that we should look at doing. And if we can get something together, we should try to do that for you, I think. Let's see. John Coffey, great name. I would love for Novation to work with an effects company and create something beautiful. Yeah, I would like to do that as well. Who knows? One day, you never know. You never know. Let's see. Okay, we need hundreds more templates for all the new gear. The promise of these updates and user community didn't happen, sadly enough. Well, I mean, the thing is, it's very easy to create your own mappings. And I would say that there is quite a buoyant kind of user community where this sort of stuff is going on. There are various places, Facebook groups and that sort of thing, that is very active, and a lot of people share a lot of this sort of stuff. But actually, that's probably a good point from Moonboy there to say, well, you've got all of the things that you need to be able to make your templates. So yeah, let's go ahead and take a look at how we can actually do that. Now, I'm going to move over to the component software now. And that's over here. So here is Novation Components. And this is the software that you use to be able to manage your Novation hardware. Now, actually, if I, let's just go to the home page here. Now you can see all of the devices that are actually available in Components, and the essentially the kind of the devices that we can control. And here, well, I mean, we're talking about the SL MkIII at the moment. We will also look at the Launchpad Pro. In fact, we're going to go and make a mapping on the Launchpad Pro. But first, let's just go to the SL MkIII. So I'll just click on SL MkIII here. There we go. And once we're in, you can see now I've got this green icon up at the top here. And that's basically saying that my SL MkIII is connected. And I can go to the librarian. I can open my different librarian packs here. And this is going to allow me to access my the backups that I've made for my SL MkIII. And I have to say, unfortunately, my computer is being an absolute nightmare this evening. So I think what I might do, oh, here we go. Let's go to the template editor. Yeah, here we go. I'm going to go to new template and just show you this page. Now, this is for the SL MkIII. And here I can choose the various different controls that I've got. So here we're looking at the rotary controls. Here are the faders as well. And here is access to the buttons and access to the grid pads as well. We have access to that sort of stuff. But what I thought I might do is let's go back to new template. And I'm going to grab a template from my hardware itself. And if I go get template from SL MkIII, okay, now it's saying, okay, well, which template do you want? Template 1 through to 64. Now, to be perfectly honest, that might be a little bit confusing if you're not quite sure which of the templates it is, which position that template is that you want. The alternative option is to go to Part here. So you click on Part, and now if I just go back to this screen here, you can see I've got all my parts here available to me, and I want to go to get the Big Sky mapping, which is this one here. So let's go to Part 5, Get Part. Got the gremlin. Part 5, Get Part. I don't know what's quite going on here tonight. This is not exactly what I would want to happen. Get Part. No, it doesn't want to do it today. I think, as I say, I've had quite a few problems on the computer here throughout throughout the evening. In fact, I had to do a restart about 2 minutes before going live, and something's not quite right. So let me just go back. Get Parts. Okay. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to just close down components for the second. I've got a lot of things running here on this computer for the live stream, and it could be that that's having a bit of an effect. So let's just open it up again. Okay, SL MkIII, template editor. Yeah, it's being really quite slow for me at the moment. Let's get template from SL MkIII. We want part, and if I remember correctly, it's part number 7. Get part. There we go. Thank goodness for that. Right, okay. Just a quick restart there. As I say, okay, well, we've reconnected. As you can see, the gremlins are out for me this evening, which is a bit of a shame, but hopefully if you're still with us, you'll see now that we're back in. I restarted components and it's all back in now, and I managed to get the part directly from the hardware itself. And I just wanted to show you here that, again, I've got my different rotary controls here, and essentially I can determine the CC number for each of these controls. So how do we find the CC number? So let's just, if you bear with me a second, I have here the Big Sky manual. So if I just go to this page, hopefully now that is up. Yeah, okay, great stuff. So now you can see both components and the Big Sky manual. Now, in all manuals for things that have MIDI, you should find towards the end of that essentially a big list of CC numbers. So let's just scroll right down to the bottom here. Okay, here we go. So on this page, you can see that I've got the MIDI CC numbers, which is this column here, for all the knobs on the Big Sky. And it couldn't really be simpler. For example, the mix, if you like, the dry-wet mix control is number 3. So if we go back to components, which is for me here, here is the dry mix, and that's set here to, let's see, which one is this? This is, this is set to 15. Oh, maybe I've got that wrong on the list here. Let's see. Mix is 15. I beg your pardon. I can't read. It's quite small on here. My eyesight's not getting any better. But for example, the tone there is number 3. And these all have a value of 0 to 127. So that means basically I can use the full range of from a starting point of 0 to 127 to get the full range of that knob, but inside the SL MkIII. Now there's a little exception here, and this is in the type page here. Now there are 11 different algorithms, and that's essentially what type is. That's saying, okay, what type of thing do I want to control? Do I want a spring reverb, a hall reverb, a shimmer? What sort of thing do I want? Now there are 11 values in there. So if you see here, I'm using CC19, which is the controller change number, the thing that allows me to control the type. And instead of going up to 127 here, I've started at 0 and it's ended at 11. And actually, if I do the maths correctly, that's actually 12 values, not 11. But basically, yeah, 0 is value and 11 is a value. And therefore, I can use this whole range, this whole encoder range, to basically give me 12 at different positions on there. And actually, if we go again back to the SL here, and if we look at the SL Mark III and we go to the big sky, here's the type control, and you can see I can just shift that around, and that allows me to then just choose the effect that I specifically want to have as I'm working on the big sky. So you've got quite a lot of control for being able to, you know, kind of program up these things. And this list of CC values is really the thing that you need. And if you have that, it's very straightforward and easy to make your own mappings in the SL or in any of the controllers via the component software. Now, just a very quick look here at the buttons. And the reason I want to go to this one is that I've got here the program change buttons. If you remember earlier, I had buttons set on the SL Mark III so that I could move up and I could move down. And this is something that I've found a few people asking about, actually, how to create kind of this up and down type of control. So here it's set to send out a program change message. That's essentially saying, okay, change the program, change the effect, you know, the preset, if you like. But instead of having a momentary, which is, you know, it happens for as long as you press the button, toggle, which is an on-off switch, or a trigger, which is a single trigger switch, I've set this to increase and decrease, or increment, decrement. And by doing that, I can then pair it with a second button. So here you'll see that this is currently paired to button 9. So button 10 and button 9 are effectively one control, but split across two buttons here. So that gives me program change up and program change down. And that allows me to go up and down throughout my program changes. So for example, here on the big sky, if I press this button, you'll see it'll go up. We go up to tanked, good name there, then come back down to studio, and then back up to tanked, and then back down to studio. So it allows me to move up and down, increase and decrease the value using a pair of buttons there. And that can be really useful as well. Okay, now, I've got the Launchpad Pro here as well, and I do want to talk a little bit about this. Of course, I've done a lot of stuff here on the SL, and you know, we've got all of the encoders, we've got the sequencer, we've got the faders, we've got all of those things available to us here. But the Launchpad Pro is also a really very strong control surface as well. Now, of course, the Launchpad Pro is actually 4 sequencers in its own right. So we have 4 different pages here. I can go to my sequencer controls here and change to chromatic keyboards. I can go and change to drum grids as well. So, you know, I have a lot of stuff that I can do on here. And in terms of sequencer, this is an incredibly powerful sequencer. It's 4 tracks. It's based around a grid layout as opposed to a keyboard layout. But in terms of a note sequencer, the Launchpad Pro Mark III is a really very strong thing indeed. But alongside that, it also has 8 custom pages. Now, a couple of weeks ago, I did a live stream where I was talking about this specific mapping, and this specific mapping is actually connected to the Octatrack, or would be at least if I had the MIDI connected to the Octatrack. And this just gives me a really great set of dedicated controls to be able to basically do performance work on the Octatrack and access things like faders here. So I've got all these different faders to give me volume controls and that sort of thing. And for me, really, the Launchpad Pro in conjunction with the Octatrack is a superb addition. It really is. I do find that the note entry, the MIDI side of the Launchpad Pro, alongside the kind of the really powerful audio processing and time stretching and all that sort of stuff that the Octatrack can do, is a really very strong combination. So we've got these various different pages, but what I thought it might be interesting to do is just for a final thing now, we'll just make a quick mapping for the Meris Auto bit. Now the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to have to connect the MIDI. So forgive me a second while I just have to grab this. Where is it now? Here we go. I've got a little MIDI socket prepared here. And now if I go to there, yeah, okay. So now my Launchpad Pro MIDI output here is going into my second chain of MIDI outputs here, which is going over to the MIDI splitter over there and coming back over here and is hitting the Auto Bit Junior from there. So let's go back to this page. And instead of the a big sky, we're now moved to the Meris Auto Bit controller change page. And again, if I go to components, which is here for me, and I just need to get these on my screen so I can see them properly, I'm going to come out of the SL MkIII mapping and go to the Launchpad Pro page. Now, hopefully components is going to behave for me. There we go. And I'm going to create a new custom mode. Now, I'm hoping that you can see all this happily on the screen. Yeah, it all looks good from where I am. And I'm going to grab some faders. So I'm just going to quickly click and drag, and I'm going to put in here 7 faders. And hopefully this will become clear as we get to the end of this little mapping session. There we go. Now these first 6, I'm going to change them to a white colour. There we go, white, just because I want to, I suppose, for want of a better reason. Let's make this last one white, and then this final one will go purple for that, so it stands out a little bit. And I'm going to just very quickly check here, because on my SL MkIII it will tell me the MIDI channel I need, and it's MIDI channel 14. So I mentioned at the beginning, you know, we've got 16 MIDI channels, but my auto bits is set to MIDI channel 14. So anything that's received on channel 14 will be received by the Auto Bit Junior, by that pedal. So I'll change this to channel 14. We'll do the same, channel 14. In fact, all of these are going to go onto channel 14. There we go, channel 14, channel 14. And finally, yep, we want this on channel 14 as well. I'm also going to add a couple of additional buttons as well. So I'm going to say, okay, let's get what colour should we go for? I don't know, let's go for yellow. So, that's it. We go back to the widgets, we go and grab a CC button, and we just drag this, and I'm going to drag this onto the top pad here. I'm also going to grab another 3 here, 1, 2, 3. And once again, I'm just going to click on that and change the colour. So let's make this top one yellow. Let's make this one kind of a purpley, a bit of a lighter purple, and then finally a bit of a darker purple. Right, so I've now set up the mapping that I want to use. I have 6 faders that I'm going to use for the 6-part sequencer that is in the Auto Bit Junior. I've also got the this one here, which I'm going to set to be the control for the stutter control. It's got a wonderful stutter in the Auto Bit Junior, and that's really the reason why I really enjoy working with it. But also I've got the ability to switch between 3 different types of sequencers: a pitch sequencer, a filter sequencer, or a bit depth sequencer. And I've also got a hold option as well. Now this is not something you can do directly on the pedal, so by giving it its own dedicated button here, we're actually adding something that the pedal doesn't actually give you. I can latch this on. So let's just click on that for now. And if I say, okay, I want this to be a toggle switch, and if I go back to my mapping controls here, let's see, where is it? I'm looking for stutter hold. There we go. It's this one here, CC number 31. So I'm going to go here, type in 31. The on value is, let's see, on value is 127 and the off value is 0. And once again, I need to set that to MIDI channel 14. So now I've created a switch here, which will be toggle, so I can turn it on and I can also turn it off, and it's set to the correct CC value. Right, now let's go to this now, and I can see here this CC22 through to CC27 are the step controls for my sequencer. So let's very quickly do CC22. What's 24 now? 24. And of course my mouse has stopped working, so I've got a big sign here saying connection loss. Should come back in a second, I hope. So talk amongst yourselves for a moment, and here we go. I've got the mouse back. There we go. So what was that? That is 24. So we'll click here. We'll go 25. Click here. 26. Click here. Let's see what's going on. That's it. We need 27. There we go. Now finally I want the stutter control here, which is CC19, and that's going to be 0 to 127. So let's go CC19, and again let's just double check MIDI channel 14. So we've got the hold switch, channel 14, stutter, the various different sequencer lanes. Let's go to this one, which is going to change to, now this is an interesting one as well. So the sequencer type, and this is going to be CC29, but I have 3 sequencer types, and each one is going to basically need a specific value. So I can say that if I go to 0, it's going to be the pitch sequencer. So I'll have both the on value and the off value set to 0, MIDI channel 14. This one, it needs to be set to between, well, it needs to be set not between, to actually exactly 63. So I'm going to go 63 here, 63 here, and the CC number was, if I remember, was not 19, 29. Okay, and then finally we'll go to this one, and that is, so 0, 63, and 127. And again, that's number 29. Okay, and MIDI channel 14. Okay, I've now created my mapping. I've done that live, a live stream. So, you know, it is completely doable. Now, the next thing is to send this to the Launchpad Pro. So I'm going to actually send it to custom mapping. Here, I'll just go back to the screen so you can see. Here you can see hopefully that, yeah, that's completely empty on the Launchpad Pro. So I'm just going to very quickly, I won't change the screen for this. I'm just going to very quickly hit send to Launchpad Pro Mark III. Going to send it to custom mode 7. And now you can see it quickly just fires that in. And I've now got my independent faders here with all the colouring. I've got my switches here as well. And I've got my hold button as well. Okay, so let's give it a quick whirl. I'm going to go again, the reface. I'm going to send it out via my auxiliary here to the auto bit. So we'll go to auto bit here. Now the first thing is I need to just turn it on, so I'm going to quickly do it. I could have mapped that on there. And you can hear the glitch there. And again, I can change the glitch position. And I can just set them all to a single note. Anyway, let's take the hold off for now. So, well, we got there in the end with that. I do apologise for that. That was completely my bad. Basically, I'd gone here and I think I must have been looking at a different, I was looking at the Auto BAM, not the Auto Bit Junior. So I'd got completely the wrong MIDI channel for that. So that kind of came and bit me on the backside. So apologies for that. But no matter, we got there in the end, as I say. And you know, if you do things properly, and you actually do pay attention to the correct MIDI channels, it's actually very straightforward and easy to create the mappings. The mapping itself took hardly any time at all. Finding the problem that I had, which was actually completely setting it to the wrong MIDI channel, that took a little moment. But again, if I'd have paid attention when I was actually doing this, it wouldn't have been difficult at all. Anyway, I'm going to finish up for now, but thanks very much for joining me again. As I say, that's been a look at kind of using, you know, control surfaces directly with effects processors as opposed to just specifically for using with synthesizers and with pitched instruments. It can be a very creative way of actually using, you know, or enhancing your production work, you know, automating a reverb tail, automating, you know, the decay length of, I don't know, some delays or something like that can have really quite a nice effect. And also being able to record those movements in there just breathes a lot of life into your recordings. Anyway, as I say, I'm going to finish up for now, but I hope it's been an interesting little journey for you. It certainly has for me. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing you at the next one. Thanks very much indeed. Cheers.